Hello and welcome to Diminishing Returns. This week we are twinned with the British Sitcom History Podcast to talk about a sitcom film spin-off, The Inbetweeners. So joining me, Alan, is Sol.
Boop, 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 boop.
doing the theme tune from the British Sitcom History Podcast. Yes, thanks to Tom O'Fallow's.
Speaking of Tom O'Fallow's, thanks for that snazzy new remix that you've just heard. He's sent in, Alan. He sent us like a combo mashup of both theme tunes to use, which is pretty cool.
Very good.
And joining us from the British Sitcom History Podcast is Gareth.
All right, wankers.
See what I did? As part of the British Sitcom History Podcast, we are looking at The Inbetweeners. That will be going out very shortly if you're listening to this as it goes out. Those episodes will be going out in the weeks after. But right now...
we're kicking off with this.
On the film, yes. So we talk about the film because that's what we do.
The Inbetweeners movie.
Yes, movie, not The Inbetweeners film. Americanism.
It never quite... I've seen one case where they use film in the name of a film, which is Keith Lemon, the film. And it was just it was a really tragic reminder of just how low budget and British the whole affair was.
Yeah.
So, if they want to call it the Inbetweeners movie, whatever. I'll let them have it.
Even Mrs. Brown's Boys didn't call it a film.
The movie.
The film.
Well, Sol, you said there we last time we had one of these mashup episodes, it was indeed to talk about Steptoe and Son. And I remember Alan telling us that just the way the funding worked, there was lots of those sitcom movies in the 70s because it was really cheap and easy to make. And then there were none made for years and years and years.
Yeah.
Alan, did you say that The Inbetweeners was the one that kicked it all back off?
Oh, massively. 100%.
The Inbetweeners had the biggest opening weekend for a British comedy.
No, Alan.
Oh, even better than Sex Lives of the Potato Man.
I believe the Inbetweeners movie had the biggest opening weekend for a comedy ever in British cinemas.
Oh, as opposed to a British comedy, right?
It beat. Wow. Well, I imagine it was both, to be perfectly honest, but it beat out The Hangover Part 2. I think previously held the record.
High Company. It
made a pretty staggering $57 million at the global box office off the back of a £3.5 million. Sorry, that's £57 million. Sorry, did I say dollars?
Say it, so.
It made £57 million at the global box office. It only got a limited release overseas, obviously, but off the back of a £3.5 million budget, it made £57 million box office. And then however much it went on to make on DVD and TV and so on. So it was a huge film by British standards. And a pretty solid effort even by Hollywood standards, to be honest.
I must admit as well, what I like about that is that I know the people who are involved, the creatives, the writers and the actors, are going to get a much bigger payday out of this than they did from the TV series, even though the TV series was what made it a success.
And was what better.
Just because of the way these things work. And by the time you're making a film, you can go, okay, well, I want this much money. And I don't know, I have no idea what their deal was, but I imagine the principal actors got a little taste of the back end, so to speak.
I believe...
Fucking
hell. Is that a quote from The Inbetweeners you've just pulled out, or is that just you channeling
No, but
Jay?
I've spent the last week watching The Inbetweeners, so my mind is absolutely sewer.
Right. I know the writers. What are their names? Damon Beasley and Ian Morris. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
I know they got some pretty nice deals to,
well,
make movies.
They're the producers as well as the writers and creators.
Yeah, so, one of them directed the second one as well, didn't they?
They're a lot more than just script writers. They're they're producers, yeah.
But I believe off the back of the Inbetweeners movie, they signed some sort of 4-picture deal with Film 4 that, set to make them a very nice amount of money for a Film 4 deal.
And they're working with Taika Waititi as well now.
Are you aware that Taika Waititi, really cut his directing chops directing the American remake of The Inbetweeners?
We did mention that, but yeah, also Damon Beasley and Ian Morris wrote a couple of episodes of Flight of the Conchords. as well. So they're kind of all involved in that world together.
Yeah, and that US remake was, of course, poorly received, cancelled swiftly. Although, must be said, it's very rare that a British sitcom remake even gets to series. They normally don't get past the pilot stage, so that's something. But are you aware that they also signed a deal? It's in theory still happening, but I'm assuming this project's dead based on nothing being mentioned about it in years. Are you aware they also signed a deal to make a US remake of the Inbetweeners movie, specifically, independent of the show? I think Paramount signed on to do a US remake called Virgins America, which would presumably...
Richard Branson cameo?
be about 4... American teenagers going on holiday abroad, I'm guessing.
Well, you know what, Sol? That's interesting because I didn't know that. But now you've planted that seed in my head, it's making me think that might be one of the reasons. So I didn't enjoy the films as much as I enjoyed the series. I don't think that's a revolutionary thought. But perhaps one of the reasons is that the films are probably more translatable to an American context, whereas the series is so British. It's so uniquely British. And I think that's why it appeals to me a bit more.
I don't know. I think you'd struggle to get an American audience to really sit down and watch the Inbetweeners movie and appreciate it unless they're proper, what do you call it?
Anglophiles.
Anglophiles, that's the word I was looking for. But I don't know, can I ask how you guys feel about the Inbetweeners? Obviously, I've not heard your episode yet, as this goes out first.
Well, the summary of my take on the Inbetweeners was that I watched it, 10 years ago. I found it very relatable. However, having watched it again now, as a 45-year-old, or more importantly, as the father of a 15-year-old, I was watching it with a completely different perspective. And I really empathise with the parents.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think our general opinion was we're really positive. We both really liked it. We both really related to a lot of it. Yeah. That's
interesting because you're both obviously not a fair bit, but you're both older than I am.
Oh, I'm a fair bit older than you.
But, I was the perfect age for the show when it came out. I was in sixth form when the first series came out on TV.
Oh, right.
So,
wow, God, you are young.
So it hit at the point where I was pretty much the main demographic they were aiming for, I think.
Well, can I ask you then, Sol? Because I also didn't watch it when it first came out. It was a few years later, so I was well into my 20s when I watched it, but I could cast back and relate to it. But of course, the people who wrote it were born 10 years before me. So I feel like I don't know necessarily that a 2008 teenager, 16-year-old, 17-year-old, is going to relate to it in the same way as someone who is looking back, if that makes sense. So did you watch it at the age of 18 and go, yeah, totally get that. That's me.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say it wasn't just me. Like, this was a huge show among sixth form and, everyone was watching it as it went out first run. It was a huge thing at sixth form. Yeah, I think part of that was it was, very relatable, very well observed stuff. I mean, just to kind of put my thoughts out there, I for our listeners, I give the series an 8 out of 10, put it that way. I really like it. It's very lowbrow and not nearly as witty as British comedy can be at its best, but it's still generally a pretty good bit of fun if if you're willing to go with it. And like I say, I think it does have a real sense of nostalgia for me because I was that age as it was going out, and it was quite a big part of sixth form.
I think part of the appeal of this to me is a nostalgia element, as in I was watching this and going, oh God, I remember what it was like to be 16. I don't think I would want to watch it going, oh, this is what I'm like now, aren't I a dickhead? I don't know if that would have quite the same appeal.
Well, I don't think many people did. I think girls and boys liked it alike, and I think most of the girls at sixth form were probably watching it and thinking like, oh yeah, that's what those annoying boys are like at school.
I find that interesting, Sol, because we were conscious of this when we were talking about it as two men. It was it's a very male program, but in the films we have a lot more we see a lot more from the female characters. And I don't think they're particularly well served. I don't think they're well written.
I think it's one of the major failings of the film, actually.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I think the female characters in the first film in particular are hindrance in multiple ways. But I'm sort of trying to get my positivity about the show out of the way so I can start going hard on the movie.
All right.
Okay.
Can I ask just quickly then, on the relatability front, I think generally with a lot of sitcoms there's a tendency to kind of be like, oh, which one of the gang are you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't quite figure out with the Inbetweeners. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Do you feel an affinity towards any one of those characters?
I think this is one of the problems I have with the Inbetweeners. We're supposed to relate to Simon. He's the normal one. All of the others are caricatures. And he's the one who's closest to a normal person, the everyman.
I think, as I'm going to complain about here, I think Simon is a fucking knob and I hate him. I think I'm about, I don't know, back at sixth form I was probably more like Will than anything, but would like to think of myself being closer to Jay. Not that either are particularly...
Yeah, none of them are particularly...
people to aspire to. I think I've become more like Jay as I've grown older, which is, again, not a positive.
I can definitely see you as a Jay in the sense that you're just a stirrer. You're really only interested in getting a laugh rather than anything else.
But I don't just compulsively lie constantly, which was a trait that a friend of mine at sixth form did have.
Both Gareth and I were grammar school boys who went to a boys' school and then went to a sort of mixed sixth
Will
form.
Then?
Well, yeah, you'd think so, but
completely.
But no, not really. Because I didn't stick out at sixth form in that sense.
I think. Can we talk about the characters broadly a bit before we get into the film? Because a big part of the film, again, why I'm going to go hard on it, is I don't think it quite captures
I agree
think they're
with
out
Saul.
of character.
I don't think it serves the characters at all.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Well, I will say that, Jay was obviously this breakout character. I don't know if that was your experience, but certainly at sixth form, he was the one people were quoting. And
well, that's just because he's got the best little lines. Yeah.
But it was very much that kind of, it takes on a life of its own thing, to the point that it starts being picked up by people who don't really understand the joke, and his stuff starts being said unironically. And basically, I guess the point that I'm trying to build to here is that by the time the movie came out, I was feeling a bit of pushback, really, against the series and Jay because of the fan base having made it just annoying. So
I understand that. I didn't really have other people that were watching it at the same time as me. So, but I know exactly what you're talking about, because I get that sort of thing all the time with different things.
You must have seen, for example, the orange ads that played in the cinemas for about 6 months with Jay from the Inbetweeners meeting the Expendables 2.
Well, I saw the ads. I saw the ads with him in it, and then they cut to a shot with Sylvester Stallone. I never saw them together or interacting in any way. I don't think they ever actually met, but
But I just think the show was something of a victim of its own success, and I think the movie is arguably part of that, an extension of that. I'm going to sound like I dislike it more than I do. I don't dislike it, but broad strokes, I think it is your classic. They haven't captured what made this work on screen. They've kind of sold out a bit. This is dumbed down, if you can believe it, from the show.
I think they've somehow lost some of their charm, and that's a word I use advisedly. But it just feels like a bit of a more blunt instrument that they're hitting us with in the movie.
Yeah,
it's lost something. It's lost some subtlety.
There's a lack of, again, probably the wrong word, but innocence.
Yes,
seeing them and seeing them in a school uniform makes everything so much easier to go. It's like a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old is so different, and it makes a difference to how they behave, how we accept their behavior.
There's also a big difference in terms of how, it's a movie, so it's willing to go further with things. And so the perfect example of that is that one of the opening scenes introducing us to Jay in this film is him preparing to have a fancy wank with a is it like a baseball glove and some cold cuts of turkey,
a snorkel,
and it's just a bit more explicit than I ever remember the show being, in a way that is obviously going for gross out laughs, but is actually just a bit gross.
But I think Alan's got a point there. I think Jay in the Inbetweeners series is he's certainly charmless, but he's tragic. He's a tragic figure. Whereas in the films, where he's a bit older, he's almost predatory.
He's a knob.
yeah, exactly.
He's a dickhead in the
he's not charming at all.
Just that opening with Jay, like we've seen him before masturbating or whatever, or getting ready to have a wank. And, things like, if you sit on your hand and it goes dead and then it feels like someone else is doing it. It's like, we all know that. We've heard that. It's an urban legend or something you've tried. But having a wank with some ham and wearing a snorkel doesn't, that's just some random nonsense.
That's not universal, is it?
It's not a relatable humour. It's just a weird thing that he's doing.
Well, that really felt like they've watched American Pie and they were like, oh yeah. We've got to try and do something like that, but, worse. Yeah, I mean, at the same time, I did find it really... it's you're just waiting for the mum to walk in, but I did find it really funny that his reaction to that was, I'm just trying to book a holiday, is what he shouts at her.
To Turkey.
So... it's not all bad. It's still got more or less that level of humour that I think the show operated at. It's more the writing and the plotting that I think lets this movie down. I think there's an air of tragedy about it, first of all, because it is a British movie on a pretty low budget, trying to aspire to more. So that means that we finally see Will's dad, who's been referred to throughout the series, and it's the huge celebrity get. And do you know, Alan, they managed to get the dad of the girl who plays Carly.
Yeah. How did they get his number?
They managed to get him for about half a day's filming, it would seem like. And don't get me wrong, I love Anthony Head. He's one of my favourites. I love it when he pops up and stuff. But Anthony Head is someone you could get to be a significant character in the Inbetweeners movie. And to get him in for a pointless scene up front that is just there to say, look, it's Anthony Head, and adds nothing else. It's bizarre. And it just makes the whole thing feel tragic. And they probably could have got someone, a bit... If extras could get fucking Samuel L. Jackson and Kate Winslet and David Bowie...
Hugh Grant.
Then...
They should have got Hugh Grant.
Yeah.
Anthony Head is a pound shop Hugh Grant.
Exactly.
Oh.
Hugh Grant is... probably attainable for one scene playing Will's dad at the start of the Inbetweeners movie. Anyway, so that's a really weak opening scene, and that is the very first scene. Then we have this huge shot from sky, and it comes down from the clouds, and it, flies through the streets and lands on this, house. And that's like half the movie's budget right there, which is just painfully obvious, the first time you watch it. And it doesn't work because there's nothing else like that in the film. It's like blowing their load up front, and then it's basically an episode of the show, but in abroad.
And it works in the sense of what it's doing, and it sets the scene, and all that. But yeah, it just doesn't seem necessary. And I think one of the real charms of the TV show is its low-grade nature. It feels like it's just shot on some digicams and sort of thrown together, not much lighting.
Channel 4 for you, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
But I think that really helps, and it really adds to the style of it. Now, I appreciate for a film you might want to go a little bit more glossy, but I don't think you need to overdo it. And I think generally they don't. It's just that opening, like you say, they do kind of throw their wad up on that. So yeah, you could have spent that money getting Hugh Grant, but it looks nice. It still works. So if we actually deal with the plot of the film, it's these lads they've graduated from sixth form now. They're at university and they decide to get together for a lads' holiday in Malia in Greece. Now here's a problem in terms of relatability. I never went on a lad's holiday because, it seems like hell. But did you ever do that, Saul?
No, it's not.
Well, I went on a lad's holiday when I was probably 18, maybe 17. My mate Damo had an uncle who worked at a resort in Spain. And so we went out for a couple of weeks to stay with him. But unfortunately, what I didn't know until we got there was that he was working in a resort called Sitges on the Costa Brava, which is the gay capital of Europe. So I had a perfectly nice couple of weeks, but I wasn't knee deep in clunge. Let's put it that way.
Still, any port in a storm, right?
That's all part of growing up, isn't it?
I mean, obviously, we spoke about it last time round, but the cliche of you make a British sitcom movie is, they all go on holiday. Like, that's all they do here. And they almost try and make a little comment on it by having Jay's dad say, there's a point where he's driving them to the airport and he says, in my day it was all, go on a holiday to Spain Magaluf. Or whatever. Magaluf, yeah. And then
Shagaluf, we called it.
Yeah. So one of the films that the writers, producers of this followed up, I think probably the first, maybe the second in that Film 4 deal that I mentioned, was that film, The Festival. And it really struck me, going back to this, like, wouldn't this have been better served and more like in the spirit, I think, of the series, more true to what the Inbetweeners is, and it's kind of low, like you were saying, Alan, the kind of low-grade, cheap aesthetic. If they just went to a festival rather than a proper holiday.
Well, that's it. When actually, now you say that, when I was a teenager, growing up near Leeds, the thing to do was go to Leeds Festival.
Oh yeah, that's the thing to do in a lot of places, Alan.
yeah, but I'm just saying that locally for me because we were so close. So that's what everyone did, and it was
Did
just
you do
complete. That? Yeah, no, I didn't, obviously, because I didn't want to go. But
I mean, I went to the local one round my way, which more recently opened, Creamfields, and I mean, fuck me, what a horrible experience, what an awful time, but. There's a lot of material to be mined there, and it's in the same vein as what this is. I mean, like I say, you can watch that film, The Festival. I don't know if you've seen it, but it includes a group of drunk people dressed as Smurfs, which are also in this movie, for example. And it's not contrived to believe that these characters would go on holiday together, but I don't know, there's just something a bit lazy.
I know what you're saying. Yeah, I know what you mean, actually. I think them going on a lad's holiday is perfectly fine. It works. But I do think, like you're saying, a festival would perhaps have had a better aesthetic and a better griminess to it. Plus, if you get the budget to make a film, you go, shall we shoot this in Greece or shall we shoot this in Reading? What do you think?
Well, honestly, if I get the budget and it's £3.5 million, I probably think, can we make something a bit more cinematic in Reading, or can we make like a really low budget film in Greece? That's kind of your option. Like you have the crowds to play with. You can pull in all the celebrity fans that are performing for some celebrity cameos, and it won't be too contrived. Like I think you could make your money go a lot further in Reading, honestly. But then I guess Reading's expensive, and you probably get tax breaks in Greece, don't you? So.
Yeah, probably something like that. Yeah.
What do we think? Just in principle, on the other podcast, we talked a lot about the supporting characters that I think are an important part of the setup of the Inbetweeners. But it feels like they're all a little bit crowbarred in here. It's like, oh, you want to see all your favourites? Here they are.
As you get with British or just sitcom movies in general, there's usually about 15 minutes at the start where every popular supporting character gets one scene.
Would the film be better without them, or is it nice to see that? Is it nice to see Mr. Gilbert and Will's sexy mum?
With regards to their parents, I think they're a big enough part of the show, and it's organic enough to see, Neil's dad, who I think was definitely a big part of the show, and Jay's dad. Obviously, I watched one episode of the show to kind of refresh my memory before rewatching these films, but I haven't really watched the Inbetweeners in about 7-8 years. Whenever the second movie came out was the last time I watched anything to do with it. So it was nice to be reminded that, oh yeah, Jay's dad is a prick, and that's a big part of why Jay is like the way that he is and stuff like that. So I don't mind it with the parents. Carly's obviously a big part of the plot, and it works relatively organically. And then there's just Mr. Gilbert, who was the big fan favorite supporting role, and they do just kind of crowbar him in. And seeing him at the start, I think, is fairly organic. I think that works, but it's also not enough, and they know it's not enough, so then they crowbar him in halfway through the film, and that doesn't work, and it just reminds you that you're missing Mr. Gilbert. And would it have been so difficult to write him a proper role in the movie? If they write, oh, he's gone to the same holiday resort they're at, can't you make that a bigger part of the film? You can get a lot of material out of that, surely.
Yeah, but they know that it doesn't work because they filmed all that stuff and then cut it out. So.
Oh, did they? I was going to say, because all you need is 2 more scenes making it a running gag.
In the deleted scenes.
Right, okay, there we go. Well, Right, fair enough.
Although you've just reminded me of a bit in the show where Jay and Neil see Mr. Gilbert in the shop, like in a shopping centre, and they're just like bewildered that he exists outside the school. And so they just go, Gilbert! And then run away.
That's so funny. That's a very well observed and relatable moment.
Should we get into those girls? Because basically they meet 4 counterpart women in a shit bar, and it's very clearly one girl for each boy, but they never quite make a joke out of it in the way that they might have done. You know, it's not like Will ends up with the bespectacled one who's a bit of a nerd. The only one who's actually a bit like their counterpart is there's a lanky weird one for Neil.
Yeah. But it's not like that scene in Shaun of the Dead where they walk past
Neil, by the way, like in my recollection, he is like this huge lanky beanpole of a guy. And I realised the other day, having a chat with some of our listeners on our Discord, it's just that all the Inbetweeners are really short. The guy who plays Neil is 6 foot tall, which is the same height that I am, which isn't that tall. But I mean, another little Ponzi name drop story here. I mean, we didn't even do the first one properly with Mr. Gilbert yet, Alan. We'll get to that later, I guess. There's no story. We just worked on a thing, and Mr. Gilbert was there, and he took photos with a load of people at the end of the day. But you and I decided not to be unprofessional by asking him for one. But he was very he actually is very tall. He actually is like a monster.
Yeah, Greg Davis is 6'8". So Sol and I worked with Greg Davis on a short film, basically, in which we were sort of helping because it was a charity thing, so it wasn't very official. But we were helping out, and then we
were paid in McDonald's, I believe.
Yeah, and we did a scene. We were extras in a scene where we were running out of a room and he shoved us out of the way. And then I worked on lighting. I don't know what you did.
I did some work as I've got a credit as a best boy or something on that.
Yeah, best
so
boy.
We all did a bit of everything, yeah.
I was second best.
The thing, like, I can't get over how small Simon Bird is. That's pretty much what I'm leading to. I also worked on a thing with Tom Rosenthal in it, and he, for people who don't know, Simon Bird's probably second best known after the Inbetweeners for Friday Night Dinner, another British sitcom in which his brother is played by a guy called Tom Rosenthal. And in that show, Tom Rosenthal towers above him. Like, you'd think, oh God, Tom Rosenthal, what a tall guy. When I met Tom Rosenthal, I was taken back by how short he was, like significantly shorter than I am. But then when you look at pictures of him next to Simon Bird, he is like twice his height. And it just makes me think, like, Simon Bird must be on the cusp of it being a medical thing.
Well, that's how you get cast as a teenager, even though you're 24.
Yeah, I guess that's probably it, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, I've worked with Blake Harrison.
Yes.
I did some extra work.
Did he seem very tall and lanky?
No, not especially.
Yeah,
in a sitcom called Big Bad World that he was leading, and I was in that. I also did something with Anthony Head, if you want to mention it. I was in Vanity Fair with Anthony Head. Yeah, so.
The magazine did a photo shoot.
It was a nude. It was respectable nudes. It was classy. It wasn't like.
Oh, I love Anthony Head.
What do you mean you love Anthony Head? What do you mean you love Anthony Head? What have you seen Anthony Head in?
7 seasons of Buffy, a few episodes of Angel, Repo the Genetic
Jonathan
Opera,
Creek.
The first episode of Jonathan Creek before they recast him because they realised he was too expensive.
Because he went to do Buffy, that's why.
He went off to do Buffy, you're right. I'm a big fan of his singing voice. He did Rocky Horror on the stage, although I never saw it and don't really care about Rocky Horror, but
you're a big fan of that anyway. I think you've got Buffy goggles on here.
I love Anthony Head. He's not done.
I've nothing against the guy. I have nothing against the man. I've just never really seen him in anything. Like to say, oh, Anthony Head, they've got what a get that is. Unbelievable.
I'm not saying he's a get.
Bloke.
I'm saying he's a get in the same way that Mr. Gilbert's a get. Like, that's a good actor that they've got, and they should be able to do something with it. It's not to say, like, wow, how did they get him? I know exactly how they did. They, phoned up his agent and went, look, your daughter's in it. And they went, oh, yeah. Go on then. Anyway, so the main characters we haven't really gone into them, but we have Will, the bespectacled, nerdy Harry Potter guy.
Briefcase wanker.
Will is very much our protagonist of the show. He is like
this
he's
is
the
where
narrator.
I have a problem, Saul, because Will's our narrator, and Will's the kind of central character, if you like.
He's the eyes of the audience.
Simon is the everyman. Simon is the relatable one, I think, and there's a mismatch there.
Yeah, completely. And then we have Jay, who is sex obsessed, talks a load of shit, compulsive liar, clearly a virgin. Is he still a virgin by the end of the series, or does he actually... He gets a girlfriend, doesn't he?
Yeah, no, he has a girlfriend, but he's still a virgin, yeah.
Okay. And Neil, who
virgin
is your...
with rage.
And then you have Neil, who is your bog standard. They're the stupid one. From every sitcom ever made. He is the quirky...
I think Jay is raging teenage id. He's got absolutely. He's just all those hormones laid bare with no controlling influence. He just lets it all out.
And I think with Neil, he's not... Idiot isn't quite right. He's innocent in a way. He's naive, I think. And when they're always talking about sex and like, oh, they want to have sex, he's obviously going to be the first one to lose it because it's not a big deal to him. He's not building it up. It's just like one day it'll happen. It's like, oh yeah, I had sex, by the way.
But this is one of my problems with the film, in that Neil's a good example of where the characters they just turn up the caricature just that little bit too much. So Neil is an idiot. Neil's a complete fool in the films, whereas he's just more naive and innocent in the series.
But once again, like Simon Bird's height, I think Neil is, you could probably diagnose his intelligence as a disorder. Like, is that not fair?
Maybe in the films, but as I say, in the series, he's just a bit dopey.
Am I just misremembering? The one episode I rewatched just to refresh myself on it, he punches a fish to death, which isn't
good choice.
Choice of that was a field trip. That's the episode that we cover in our.
Oh really?
In our podcast, yeah.
But that is a good example because he's gone fishing, and you kill the fish because it's cruel to just let it flop around until it drowns. You smash its head in.
But you could just put it back in the water, and he says it won't survive, which I don't think's true.
Yeah, but if he's gone fishing, you catch the fish, you smash it against a rock or something just to put it out of his misery, and then you take it home and eat it. But like in his slightly simple brain, he's gone, well, what should I do to kill this fish? Oh, punch it. And I think that works. It's like
I think it works. I just think he's not an intelligent character. He's the dumb one. That's his role in the show. There's most sitcoms have the dumb one, and they have varying degrees. I'm not saying he's at the level of Beavis and Butthead or Dumb and Dumber, but he's maybe more of a Joey Tribbiani. Like there's a degree of intelligence there, but he's still the dumb one.
And women like him because it's uncomplicated.
Yeah, so there are four main characters anyway, and then the movie pretty swiftly... Well, Simon has a running thing throughout the show, a kind of will they, won't they, with Carly, and basically they go on holiday so that he can pursue her to the ends of the earth at the same resort that she's gone to.
Well, no, he doesn't know, does he?
Oh, you're right. Neil books it because it's the one because she breaks up with him at the very start of the film.
Yeah. And
so he's played, like, throughout the film, it's him being, much like he was in the show, this kind of, lovelorn, desperate loser.
Well, that's it. Again, everything's just turned up slightly, like Gareth said there. So in the show, it's this girl he's known for his whole life, and he's always had a massive crush on her. So she's the girl next door, like the one who's unattainable. And then at the start of the film, we see that they've actually got together finally. But then she's like, look, we're going away to universities. Let's not try and do a long distance thing. Let's split up. Which, by the way, if anyone who's watching who is in that situation, definitely the correct decision. Go to uni and be free and single. But then in the film, he's chasing her and he's trying to win her back. So it's slightly different, but basically the same principle. But it's all just a bit over the top. And some of the things he does do some very stupid things rather than...
Yeah. And he is, he's as stupid as Neil is in the show in this movie. And that's the thing, like this movie, everyone seems out of character because it all seems to be plot driven rather than character driven. It seems to be, we had an idea for a funny scene. Yeah. How can we bend our characters over backwards to fit them into this hole that they don't make sense in? So a good example of that is Simon at one point decides he needs some money, so he inexplicably goes to sell all his clothes on a street corner.
Yeah.
Some knobhead comes past and very clearly winding him up, makes a fake phone call, like where his friend is gonna, give him whatever it was, €100 or whatever for the lot.
Yeah.
But he has to have all his clothes, including the ones that he's wearing. And Simon not only doesn't realise it's a joke and takes his clothes off, but Will, who's with him as well, also doesn't clock that it's a joke. He clocks that it's maybe a bad idea, but not, this is a scam, he's lying, mate.
That's not realistic.
And then we just have a scene where Simon's naked, and that's the joke. And but it doesn't play because it's so weak how they get to that point.
Yeah. It certainly is. In fact, I think that's probably the weakest point of the film in terms of the characters that we know and love.
I mean, I think the weakest aspect for me are the love interests. These 4 girls they meet. So they go to a shit bar, which isn't that bad. It's just empty. But that's probably partly because they go in at 3 PM or whatever it is. And then 4, counterpart women come in and basically spend the whole movie throwing themselves at these 4 absolute pricks who give them nothing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just so at the end of the film, they can have a happy romantic ending where they all realise the error of their ways. Like Simon... No, Will's counterpart, this incredibly attractive blonde woman who's, gone on to have a Hollywood career. She was in one of the Transformers movies in a substantial role. Do you remember that, Alan?
Oh, really?
Yeah, she was Optimus Prime, wasn't she?
She was Chris Pratt's mum in the flashbacks in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies.
Wow.
Both of them. They brought her back for the second one.
Do you know what the biggest problem with her is? That she looks about 28.
Yeah.
I don't know how old the actor actually is, but obviously you're hiring actors who can look 18, and she doesn't. And then couple that with the fact that she's a very mature character and she's quite sensible throughout most of it. It makes her seem so much older. It doesn't fit. And
Will's a quote unquote mature character, but he does it in a way that is like, oh, this is someone who is very inexperienced and immature. He's
precocious. He acts in the show. He's a 16-year-old who wants to be 35 and wants to be seen as that. But he still has all the baggage that comes with being a 16-year-old.
Exactly. Whereas she is just like you say, just like a mature character, and she's the least bad one of the lot. Her and Will have some scenes interacting, a bit of flirting. You see how she might find him charming. They actually laugh a bit about things.
Yeah, the question is not why is she attracted to him, but why is she hanging out with these other people that she doesn't appear to have anything in common with?
That are 10 years younger than her.
Yeah. The other problem with that is we set her up as what she is, and we say, okay, her and Will could get together, fine. But then we get, she's going out with this Greek waiter, and she's come back to see him again. And she's fallen for this kind of creepy Greek waiter that we then do end up revealing is a creepy Greek waiter and is just shagging whoever he can find. That character would not fall for that. And we never get an explanation of why she would. And so that's the inconsistency of the character, I suppose.
I don't know. I don't have too much of a problem there. But I mean, so the other ones we have are Simon's counterpart, who is the brunette with a fringe. And I can't stand it because he spends the whole film going on about his ex and how he, misses her and he's going to win her back and how amazing she is. Which, on one hand is played for laughs. And to be fair, that's not the worst comedic premise in the world. They don't really do anything funny with it. And they get some jokes out of her clearly coming onto him and him being oblivious to it and running off to see Carly and stuff. But what does she see in him?
How many times is she going to go back?
Because she's a pretty attractive woman. She could do perfectly well on holiday with, some nice men if she wanted to, if that's what she's interested in, which she obviously is because she's desperately sniffing around Simon, who's not remotely interested and a prick.
Yes.
And has an awful haircut. And I hate Simon. Simon is just, you're meant to think he's the everyman, but even in the show, he was always, I knew people like that at sixth form, and they were nice, but they were just so fuck off. Have some personality. Get a personality.
He's vacant, isn't he? That's the
vacant,
thing.
Great word, yes, that's exactly what it is. There's just nothing there.
And in this movie, he is he's an idiot, a real idiot. and rude and a dick. And then at the end of the film, he turns around and goes, oh, you know what? I've just had an epiphany that actually that other girl fancies me and is quite attractive. So I'm going to do a big grand romantic gesture so the film has like a big moment to end on. And sure, they undercut that with the joke as well, but it's still like, that's kind of, the plot is hinging on these romantic relationships, and it's weak. It just doesn't work.
Oh, that one's the worst, yeah. Because you'd never get any sense of why she would keep pursuing him.
He's not sympathetic at all. He's sympathetic in the show. We relate to him. We want him to win. We want him to get the girl. And you know, he's frustrated constantly. Whereas you're absolutely right. In the film, he doesn't deserve the girl. He's absolutely messed her around.
That's it. Like, I know it's awful to talk in terms of like deserving women and so on, but yeah. but insofar as from a film writing point of view, your protagonists either deserve a happy ending or don't, like, you know, based on their morality displayed throughout the film. He deserves an unhappy ending. He doesn't.
So, Sol, you've hit on my biggest problem here with the film. You're saying that in the film they don't deserve a happy ending, whereas in the series they're more relatable and you want them to do well. But in the series, and this is very important, they never win. They always end up losers at the end of the episode. And in this, they all end up happy at the end. And that I'm not convinced by that. That's a complete betrayal of the characters.
I will say again, you know, this was meant as the grand finale. And I think, you know, they were writing this when they were working on series 2, I believe, of the show. So they obviously ended the series with, you know, it wasn't like they rounded up the show and then went, oh, we'll make a movie. They probably thought, right, well, we'll save a happy ending for the very end and what have you. But you're right, it doesn't quite ring true. It feels a bit hollow and like they've gone Hollywood. But Alan, I think it's interesting. You said that was the worst relationship of the bunch, and I'm not sure it is. I think the worst one might be Jay and is it Jane?
Yes, Jane, yeah. Well, a very similar thing, but I think Jay in all this, we'll get into what, but I think Jay is a lot more sympathetic in all this, and you understand what he's doing, whereas Simon's just being a dick.
Yeah, completely. I agree with that. But I guess my issue here is more going back to things not being conveyed very well, or just not put together on a technical, let's make this script into reality kind of way. This character that Jay is matched up with is written as fat woman, and the whole point is fat, and she's not just meant to be fat, but it's, you know, it's fat to the point that you cannot walk down the street without people turning heads and making comments.
People are shouting at her in the street about her
making jokes about beached whales to her face, even after they meet her. She's that obese. And who they've gone and cast is actually a barely overweight plus-sized model who's extremely attractive. Again,
she's beautiful.
Obviously, it's shit because it doesn't play and it's stupid, and it means the whole film just feels fake and dumb, and you keep forgetting that she's meant to be fat. But a huge part of the story is Jay being a dickhead who, you know, is embarrassed to be seen with her and overcoming that, and, you know, learning to be okay with who they are and not listen to dickheads. But in the show, he had no shame about trying to get a blowjob off a 70-year-old grandma. Like,
that's it, exactly. If we saw these characters and they'd looked across the room and go, oh, she's a bit of all right. Oh, what do you mean she's a bit fat, isn't she? No, mate, fat's good, more cushion for the pushing. I once shagged the world's fattest woman once, it was great.
It's completely out of character that he would have any issue with it at all. He'd be, you know, he might still talk a big game behind her back about it in a nasty way, but, you know, he'd be chasing her very full on, and he doesn't have any shame. That's the point. Jay is set up and established through 3 series of this show at this point as shameless.
But I think you could do that a little bit more subtly. He gets off with this girl, everything's going fine, and then someone, probably not one of his friends, but maybe the rep who's the arsehole or whatever, says something and starts getting into his head, like going, oh, see, you got the fat bird?
Yeah.
And just something that he's trying to impress someone else.
Exactly.
And he's like, so he has to kind of start questioning his own motives.
Exactly.
You could be more subtle about that.
Right, Dad, thought you was coming to the party.
Yeah, I was. I popped my head in the door, saw you chatting up some fat bird, so I didn't want to cramp your style.
I wasn't chatting her up. I was keeping her busy while Simon was talking to her mate.
Don't be embarrassed, son. If I was as bad with the ladies as you, I'd have moved on to the fatties months ago.
If it wasn't literally there are people walking past on the street seeing him about to kiss her who stop and start making comments because, oh, he's going to kiss a fat girl. Oh. And it's like, that's not... People don't do that. And they're not, they're not... I think they're pretty overweight, the men making those comments themselves. Not that necessarily would stop.
That's the patriarchy, Saul.
But even in this film, Neil is like shagging fat old women who are actually quite ugly and cast to be unattractive. And, they talk about how they sound like Johnny Vegas, and they actually do talk like that. And it's like, if Neil's doing that with no shame, and no one's really giving him a hard time about it, why would Jay
he's getting
suddenly...
sex, which means he's doing better than the rest of them.
But that's it, isn't it? That's it. That's the internal logic of these characters, and the internal logic just isn't there. We can obviously all the things we're talking about. I feel like we need disclaimers to say obviously these are horrible opinions that they all have, and the way that they treat women is awful, of course. But within the internal logic of these characters. There's a
they're
system.
horny teenagers.
There is a code,
scruples.
and they are breaking that code here, and that's why it doesn't work.
Yeah, and I think with the Neil situation, like I said, Neil is a naif, and so he's just thinking, oh look, some girl's grinding up against me. Oh, I've got a finger in the club. The fact that she's 57-year-old dinner lady doesn't matter. He doesn't even think about it. He doesn't worry about what people think of him.
Yeah,
I think Jay does. I think Jay does worry what people think of him, but he also wants to have sex.
Exactly, and the sex has always very much trumped that in the show. And a lot of teenage boys are like that. They will or would in theory take anything they could get, but they're not even being offered.
And of course that's all undercut by the fact that she's put up with this entire to-in and fro-in. Why would she stick around for all of that decision making process?
I think the idea is, she's used to it. She's heard it all.
But in the series,
she's heard it all, so it can't hurt her. But it doesn't play like a real person, and none of these...
Yeah, because you know how well-adjusted fat 18-year-old girls are about their appearance.
In the criticism in the series that there aren't enough female characters, and they're not well-serviced, they're just there as foils for the boys. And, it's about 4 boys, so that's the way it is. Whereas in the films, we have these female characters, and they're just, they're poorly written and unbelievable characters.
They're props.
Yeah.
Well, while we're talking about female characterizations, can we talk about Carly? Because this is a character that we've set up throughout the show, so we've got a lot more backstory here. And that is completely abandoned for the film, in which they turn her into a total bitch.
Well, I don't know. I mean, remind me, because it's been a while since I watched the show, but... It was a bit more of a two-way will they, won't they thing, wasn't it? Her and
Not exactly.
Simon.
Not exactly. It's always him who fancies her. But
it's always him fancying her, but she does once or twice give a little hint of, okay, maybe.
I think, but that's why I really like the character in the show, because I think it's really well drawn in that, she's obviously aware that he's interested in her, but she's not that really fussed about him. She's got other people going on. But then perhaps when one day she hasn't got someone else going on, he's there for her. And that doesn't make her a bad person. It doesn't mean she's using him. It means she's a teenage girl who will get attention when she needs it. And again, she doesn't string him along, but she makes sure he's on a string. So when she sees him talking to another girl, she will kind of just go up and just say hello and speak to him and just remind him that she's there. And I like that because it's not necessarily a malicious act. It's just a normal human thing, especially when you're a teenager, just to make sure that you're not being forgotten about. But in this film, she uses him and she's quite unpleasant to him.
Well, yeah, at the start, she breaks up with him in a way that's pretty reasonable. The only real bit is at the end, she uses him to try and make someone else jealous.
Yeah, it's just the same. It's the same as all the other characters. It's turned up too high. It's just slightly overwritten.
Yeah.
But then the other side of that is that the bad guy they have here, the club rep, who's a bit of a dick, is not a bit of a dick. He's an absolute psychopathic, insane person.
Yeah, he's a coked up.
And so having this character of Carly falling for that is plausible, but we need the moment where she finds out the truth about him and goes, oh, hang on, he's a dick. And that doesn't mean she then goes back to Simon. Or maybe maybe that's the better end. She finds out this guy's a dick, and then she goes back to Simon, and that's the moment where Simon goes, hang on, you coming back to me now? I'm your backup.
Exactly.
No, screw you. I've got a backup of my own. And
Exactly.
then he goes to her, and she goes, fuck off. How many times have you rejected me?
And that's the end because they never win.
He goes home alone, and the others stay there for an extra week.
Yeah. And you know, everything is just a bit too much in this, you know, to the point that it's not believable. It goes beyond the characterization just to like the humorous set pieces, the jokes, you know. So that, you know, cringe comedy is a big staple of certainly British comedy. And there are very few instances in cringy comedies where I really struggle to watch it and I wince. The only two things I've ever seen that I really struggle to get through are the episode of Peep Show where Mark leaves a phone message for Sophie, who his Carly. And then there's the moment in the Inbetweeners where Jay tries to impress a girl by reenacting the Crazy Frog bike thing in excruciating detail for about 2 minutes. He's there going, and you know, people are looking at him like, what the fuck? And it's, you know, it's hard to watch, but it's intentionally that way. And that's as big as the show used to go. Whereas in the movie, there's a scene where they all decide to dance over to the girls so it doesn't look too, you know, inconspicuous. So it looks like natural, like they're not just coming over.
Yeah, just dance over and chat to them.
It's like Mr. Bean. It's too big. It's ludicrous. And it's, you know, maybe Neil would do that. And the other characters would be like, what are you doing? But they all do it and join in and it goes on. And the girls don't even react to it in a sense of like, what the fuck are you doing? You know, it just
I think that's crucial because I think that seems funny and I think it works with them because Neil does dance like that. We've seen him dance like that before, and actually Blake Harrison can kind of do it all right. The fact that the other two would then follow up and try and keep up with him makes sense with their characters because they're just floundering. They don't know what to do.
But it's the big dances they go with. You know, Will doesn't do a bit of dad dancing to try and keep up and feel awkward about it. He goes for a big, like, lunge move that's like the fucking Ministry of Silly Walks. It's bizarre.
Yeah, it's a bit over the top. If you did that scene, and the point of the scene and the joke is they try and chat up some girls and they do that and then the girls laugh in their faces and walk away and they're just embarrassed and they go and get a drink. That's a good scene. The fact that it establishes them with these girls that are then going to get on with for the next hour and a half doesn't work.
But it's that's the original sin of this relationship, isn't it? We've said, you know, the way the girls react to them is totally unrealistic, and that's it. That's the first time where we like, obviously these women are weird. They're not normal.
Well, I do like that scene, the dance scene, ends with Will just going, look, we clearly have no idea what we're doing. Can we come and talk to you, please? So I kind of like that. That makes sense. That's his character.
Yeah. I want to touch on in our last episode together, I spoke about how I have a real soft spot for British sitcom movies, or sitcom movies, full stop. And I realised a big part of that is that I think comedy as a genre, I love comedy, but I think TV is the best medium for comedy. I don't think it works as well in film. And I think a big part of that is every time you try and make something funny, you're kind of assembling a new team. And I just think TV shows tend to, when they work well, it's because they've assembled a group of people and something they're comfortable playing with, a situation they can play with. And then they're able to go and play with it and you know, to varied results. Sometimes it's going to work really well. Sometimes it might not. Whereas with a film, it's kind of one and done, and then you have to start from scratch again. I think I'm often drawn to sitcom movies because it's basically like, well, we've been doing this for years, so it should start at that level of being
so why don't they
pretty funny.
Your logic's impeccable, but why are they all rubbish?
Well, they're not. I think sometimes they work just fine, you know.
I think it's
this
rare.
Is one
it's
that
very rare
work.
that a sitcom movie achieves the level of comedy that the series had.
I think it's very rare they achieve the peak of the show. I think it's fairly common that they largely capture the essence of the show and it's, you know, more or less on par.
You've got to bear in mind as well, though, that The Inbetweeners, the series, is shot like a film, not in front of an audience, not on a set. Whereas most sitcoms, when you're transitioning to a film, you're also completely changing the format and the way it's filmed and the way that you bounce off an audience. So you're throwing your actors into an area where they're not used to. And whereas this should translate a lot easier.
Yeah, you know what, when I say a lot of them are actually decent, I guess that's more a lot of the modern ones are decent because, you know, it's the modern ones that are, modern sitcoms tend to be shot that way, rather than three-wall studio sitcoms. Whereas a lot of the older ones are shit because they were completely redefining the language of the show. But, I guess my point is that, like, this is still quite an enjoyable film, and I have a soft spot for it, even though it doesn't really work. It's about 60% of what made the TV show work. It captures
I
about
think that's
60%
probably fairly accurate.
of that.
Yeah, I'd go along with that number.
So, on that note, I give it a 6 out of 10 if we want to jump into ratings.
Well, my experience was, I watched all 3 series of The Inbetweeners in the space of about 2 weeks before we did our podcast on it. Then I watched this film and I was pretty annoyed with it. Didn't like it for all the reasons we've talked about. Then I watched The Inbetweeners movie 2 and suddenly the first one looked a lot better.
Wow.
I'm still going to give it 6 out of 10. I agree with you, but it might have been a lower mark before I watched the second film.
Okay.
I think, that's a bit harsh, I think. I mean, I liked it. I enjoyed it. I appreciated it as an add-on to the series, and I did watch them kind of all back to back. I think it does let down its main premise a little bit, but it had some funny moments. I was fine with it. I gave it a fairly flat 7 out of 10.
All right, so that's the Inbetweeners movie there. Now, we are going to talk about the Inbetweeners 2. It's not called the Inbetweeners movie 2. It's just called the Inbetweeners 2.
Whatever.
But we're going to do that on a Diminisode. Available on patreon.com/DimReturns, where you get access to our bonus episodes. And just as a little tease for you now, Gareth, I think the Inbetweeners 2 is such an improvement. And, like, the first one's shit, but the second one's good.
You're off your head.
What do you make of that?
Off your head.
Ooh.
I can't. This is Beverly Hills Cop 3 all over again. I can't believe
it. We're going to get into it. So head over to Patreon and have a listen to that. If you want to hear 2/3 of our opinions on the series itself, along with pretty decent historical context as to how it came about and how it was received and all that sort of stuff, then check out the British Sitcom History Podcast. Alan, is there a place people can go to?
The internet is good. Yeah, the internet.
Just Google it.
Good.
We're at Britcom Pod on the socials.